Hope you're enjoying yourself today. Hope you're learning today at the Trade with Africa Business Summit. I think we're having a great time. What do you say? All right, give yourselves a hand. I'm really enjoying myself, and I'm learning a lot, not just on the panels and not just from the speakers, but just learning in general from you one-on-one. I really appreciate being here today, and I really appreciate the energy that's going on here at this wonderful business summit in the state of Illinois. Our next speaker needs no introduction. He is one of a kind. And, you know, a couple of times I've talked to him, I said, you know, this guy really believes in his work. He's been living in West Africa for 10 years in Lagos, and he works for PricewaterhouseCoopers, but he's going to come up here and discuss about Africa's economic outlook. And I'd like to invite Dr. Andrew Nevin to come up and say a few words and give us a talk about the economic outlook. I want to know myself. Let's give him a round of applause, please.
Thank you so much. Can everyone hear me? Yes. So it is a great pleasure to be here. I can say I've been 10 years in Lagos. I didn't go to be an economist. I went to serve clients. And I never wanted to be an economist. But sadly, after the recession in 2014, I was forced into it. And I spend a lot of my time not very happy because I'm talking about how bad the Nigerian economy is. So those of you who are in Nigeria might have heard this term, Nigeria getting poorer and poorer. So, you know, so I poor and poor in 2015, poor and poor in 2016, poor and poor in 2017, poor and poor in 2018, poor and poor in 2019, likely poor and poor in 2020. IMF, my friends say poor in 2021, 2022. So that's a meme, economic meme in Nigeria. And the reason which we created, everyone talks about it now, but the reason I tell you that is this event for me is so happy because I don't have to talk about Nigeria. I get to talk about something much happier, which is Africa, which is bigger than Nigeria. And I was also very pleased to say, where are our friends from Togo? Friends from Togo? Friends from, actually, double-hatted here. Friends from Eritrea and Ethiopia. Michael from Rwanda. We've got, well, Egypt, sort of, right? Count as Egypt? No, I know, but you live in Egypt. South Africa, friends from South Africa, right? On that. So, and what other countries are here today? The United States. USA, okay, sorry for those of you, sorry, I love Americans, but just for the avoidance of all doubt, I'm not American, I'm Canadian, in fact. So on that, though I am an immigrant myself, I was born in South Africa. My parents emigrated when I was 1. So now I've been a decade back in Africa. So I'm going to talk about a few things, not normal economic talk, and I may deviate a little bit because I might want to talk about cryptocurrency or digital assets a little bit and the impact on Africa. But let me just start to see if I can move the slides. Okay, so I want to spend a few minutes on this slide so everyone absorbs the enormity of it. Has anyone seen this slide before? Absolutely. Okay, so we think about Africa. The thing that we all need to grasp is just the sheer scale of it. And we always talk about Nigeria being a big country, but it's a small piece of all this. We've basically fit 95% of the world's economy into this, into Africa. And sometimes I think people outside just don't recognize the scale of it. Of course, we all use the Mercator projection, which makes countries like Canada and Australia seem bigger than they actually are, right? I mean, the Congo is immense. And I don't know how many people have been to the Congo, but when you're in Kinshasa, and you look, in Kinshasa, you look across the Congo River, and the other side of the river is Brazzaville, right, which is the capital of the French Congo. And the size of the Congo River, and you think of this river snaking through, thousands of miles, right? It's not a straight river like the Mississippi. It's literally curving around, and just the enormity of the continent. So when we stand up and say, actually, Africa matters, the numbers and the size, the scale support it. And I think that's the message that this group needs to take to the United States to make sure that there's the right level of engagement. Because if you think about it, if we look at it from a demographic thing. Again, I want to spend a few minutes on this slide just because the enormity. The ambassador mentioned demographics a little bit this morning. But if we go back, so what this does is look at the number of births in the world. And the one thing about demographics is it's very deterministic, right? Like, things if we say there's going to be this many people in 2030 in Nigeria of this working age population, we already know that because those people are already born. In fact, if we say 2040, the working age population is already born, in fact. So unlike a lot of things, it doesn't deviate much. So if we go back to, this starts in 1950, and what this shows is the number of births over 5 years, okay? And it's divided into 3 parts. The pink part is South Asia, so basically India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, that area. The yellow part is Africa, and the orange part is the rest, everywhere else in the world. Everywhere else. So North America, Europe, Middle East, Australia, South America, that's it. So if we go back, I was born in well, I won't tell you how old I am, but I graduated from high school in 1977, so it's a long time ago. If we go back to 1960 to 65, in the rest of the world part, there were 309 million births over 5 years. In Africa, there was about 60 or a little bit less, 10 million a year, and there's probably, again, 150 or so in South Asia. Okay, so it made sense when you thought about the demographic weight of the world that this was the bulk of it. So this obviously includes China, Japan as well as part of that, and it was the bulk of the world. If we fast forward to now, so this is 2019 on that, you can see already that actually Africa has almost as many births as the other 2 big parts of the world already. So it's gone from 60 to 3 times as many births, but the births here have actually declined. So the world has, outside of Africa, the number of children is declining. The number of working age adults is stable and about to start to decline. If you take all countries together, I mean, obviously we're all aware countries like Ukraine, Poland, Japan, even China today have a shrinking working age population. But were you aware, I think this is accurate, that the United States is about to have its working age population start to shrink, which is incredible, which you think of it as an immigrant country, but it's reached its peak working age population. And if we go out just 10 years to 2030, you can see that actually there are many more babies born in just Africa than all the rest of the world or Southeast Asia put together. So this, I think, has an implication. So not anyone here is next gen. How many people in this room are under 30? Right? So we have next gen. We'll call you next gen. In tennis, you have to be under 21, but for this purpose, we'll call under 30. So if you're under 30, I mean, you're pretty likely to live close to the end of the century. So you will see a century, the end of the century, where Africa is the dominant demographic weight in the world. And there are more babies born in Nigeria today than, in fact, there are in Europe. And so this is incredibly striking, but also for a business viewpoint, everyone's seen the recent news. Germany production went down, right? Again, it's quarterly production. How easy do you think it is to grow your GDP, have economic growth, if your working age population is declining, right? I mean, look at Japan over 20 years. So in the people spend the most when they're obviously working. The age of peak consumption, at least the academic papers I've read, is about 47. Well, because that's the age, you've got kids in university, you're spending a lot yourself, house, car, if you're wealthy, second home, et cetera. And after that, it starts to decline. So it's inevitable that the GDP in Europe is going to grow slowly. It's inevitable that in China, growth is going to slow down. It's inevitable in Japan, GDP is going to grow slowly. So where is economic growth going to come from? It's going to come from Africa. Now, you might say, look, we get it, but it's such a small base. But I went to China the first time in 1983, okay? In 1983 in China, there was not a single private car. There was not one private car in the entire country. There were obviously a few cars because government officials had them on that. By 2008, and no one would have said China had the chance to be one of the world's largest economies. If you went there, people were riding bicycles, they were wearing Mao suits. It was very difficult to get a good, despite the fact Chinese cuisine is so fantastic, very difficult to get a good meal in Beijing and Shanghai. And yet 25 years later, not very long, China was the largest producer of cars, and Edward will talk about this, the largest consumer of cars on that. So, economic miracles happen. And I think and I lived in China for 10 years, and I saw this, but the conditions for an economic miracle happening in Africa are much stronger than they were in China. Much more entrepreneurial, much more business things going on already. And all we need to do to make China the world's largest, make Africa the world's largest economy is to build on that. Sorry, let's get that. So just in terms of, I'm sure everyone in this room knows it, but who are the big population countries on this? You can see, Nigeria, actually one question, sorry, is this being press, live streamed? Because I just want to see if I'm going to get deported. And, is it live streamed? All right, I'll just say this quietly, so maybe it won't come through. So it is an interesting question what the real population of Nigeria is. So those of you who are Nigerian know that, of course, there was no census in 2016. There was no real census in 2000. There's never been any accurate census, maybe the first one in the 50s, because the oil money is divided up by population. So one day between geospatial data and microcensus, we're going to figure out the real population. But for purposes of today, I'll say 196 on there. So the largest country by far, but we've got Ethiopia, we've got Congo, which are both 100 million, Egypt, obviously, and then some of the countries in the 50s and 60s. But all of these countries have rapidly growing populations. So you can see some of the numbers in the 2%, 3% for Congo. Now, I don't know if these numbers are going to hold up, but even if they hold up only for another 10 years, 20 years, Africa is going to have the demographic weight. I think as citizens, though, as global citizens, all of us should be concerned about the development of Africa. Obviously, everyone in this room is concerned about it. But if you think about it for a moment, you look at the Syrian civil war and the humanitarian tragedy and the impact it had with the refugees on Europe, right? Syria is a very small place. If Nigeria is a failed state, then we are going to have problems in Europe. So if I speak to a European audience, I say, you have the biggest interest in Africa's development, because if Africa fails, Europe is going to fail, in fact. Some of you may remember, it's sort of gone away in the news, but 3 years ago, Angela Merkel announced the Marshall Plan for Africa, or at least that's how it was reported in the English press. And she stood up, she said it wasn't because she cared, she didn't quite put it this way, it wasn't because they cared that much about Africa, but they recognized that if Africa is not successful, then Europe will perish. It's only, 7 miles from Africa to Europe, or something at the smallest point? Okay, so then in terms of some of the cities, this just lists off, how much wealth we have on here. The interesting thing for me is, we've got Cairo officially at 20 million, over 20 million. Lagos is listed here at 15, but the governor thinks at least it's 22 or 23 million. But Lagos is projected to become the world's largest city in the world. So sometimes people come to me and they say, Andrew, you could live anywhere in the world. Why do you live in Lagos? I say, because I want to live in the center of the world. And looking forward to the future, Lagos is the center of the world. And any of you who've never been to Lagos, it is a phenomenal city. The energy level, the entrepreneurialism, what's going on in the city, please come to Lagos. It's nothing like the press portrays it around the world. And I love it. It's my home, so it's just... And sometimes people come up to me and they say, oh, Andrew, you love Nigeria so much, and I nod my head. I said, actually, it's not true. I love Lagos. I'm not really Nigerian. I'm Lagosian, and I don't like traveling very much in Nigeria because every time you travel, not because I don't like going to other places, but every time you travel on domestic airlines, they're always late, right? For those of us, so it's a headache. But I love Lagos. And of course, the other aspect that's going on that's going to drive economic growth is urbanization. So I think we've just reached 50% urbanization in Africa, and it's going to keep increasing, the yellow line. Urban occupants have 3 to 4 times the amount of economic activity of rural dwellers. So all of this is driving economic growth. Okay, so in terms of economies, where are we? So this is, I think, what's interesting for all of us here as business people. Again, these are some of the largest economies. And I think, as the ambassador said, when you look at each individual economy, you tend to look at it as quite small, right? If you're sitting here in the United States, and this is in purchasing power parity terms, which I'm sure many of you understand. So they're maybe different than the numbers you've seen. So when you look from the viewpoint of the US, you have a $20 trillion economy. And Nigeria, even in purchasing power parity, is only $1 trillion. South Africa, we always talk about less than $1 trillion. Ethiopia, rising star, still only 200 billion. You sort of say, well, maybe that's not of much interest to me. But when you put this together and you think about, and I won't speak, I have slides, but I won't touch on the AFCFTA. When you put this together, you can see the economic weight just slowly moving and more quickly into Africa. And from an economic viewpoint, though, sometimes people stand back and they say, actually, it's not doing that well. So this looks at the sub-Saharan Africa growth rate, projected about 3% this year, maybe a little more last year. But I think the story that people should be looking at is underneath these numbers. Because this number, you might say, well, China's still growing at 6%. India is growing at 7%. You're coming to me and you're telling me you're growing at less than 4%. And we should get excited about, I understand the demographics. Why should I get excited about Africa? And the reason, in our view, is this is masking a specific problem. So actually, sub-Saharan Africa is doing well economically. But there are two factors that mask this a little bit. The first factor is that the giants of sub-Saharan Africa are performing poorly for their own reasons. So South Africa, here we put it in Angola, but South Africa and Nigeria are both underperforming. So you have the two largest economies in sub-Saharan Africa underperforming. And so when you look on the outside, it sort of masks a lot of other things that are going on in the continent. And why are they underperforming? I'll leave it to the South Africans to talk about South Africa, but the reason we're underperforming in Nigeria, at least the reasons that PwC gives, is basically the fact that the Buhari regime has refused to make any structural changes at all in any sense. And I might get deported from this time. I've said it publicly there many times. We stand up every week and say the same thing, that we will not improve our economic performance without some structural changes in the Nigerian economy. But the net result is that if actually the growth rate of the rest of the countries is closer to 5%, which, if you think about it, we still have problem issues like Somalia, civil war, I think in South Sudan. We got Liberia, which is a beautiful country, which is still struggling after Ebola. Sierra Leone in a similar situation, the Congo, DRC. Despite all of those challenges, outside of Nigeria and South Africa, we're still growing at almost 5%, which I think is a fantastic achievement. Cut up into these small countries, all of these challenges, and we're still growing. But if we go a little bit further and disaggregate, we actually find there are lots of bright spots. And I think this is why people should feel optimistic, because the people say to me, why do you keep going? I say, because it feels so close for Nigeria to take off. And some other countries are already getting liftoff on this. So this just looks at global, country GDPs. So 7 of the top 10 fast-growing economies are in Africa. So we've got Ghana, South Sudan, Rwanda, Ethiopia is obviously doing very well. Ivory Coast is a fantastic country, really rebounded from the war. Senegal, those of you who've been there know it's a beautiful country, doing very well. Even Benin, which is our neighbor in West Africa for Nigeria, doing very well. So despite all the challenges, despite the fact that we have not yet got the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, we still have these incredible pockets of economic strength. And if I had to just say a word about Rwanda, first, I'm embarrassed I have not been to Rwanda. I have been told that the vice president, who's wonderful, and we're big fans of his in Nigeria. I've never heard him say this, but I'm told that he has Rwanda envy. Like he's just sick of hearing about Rwanda. Do you know what I'm talking about? People, right? But I was with a client the other day, and he just got back from Rwanda. And I said, well, what did you think? He said, Andrew, the fantastic thing when I was in Rwanda was it gave me hope we can do the same thing here. So it's a beacon for the rest of Africa. And we could have a debate about some of the political issues and political freedoms, but it's a beacon for the rest of Africa to what could be done. And I don't know if I have a slide on it, but Rwanda's ranked 29th in the world ease of doing business. Is that right, Michael? 29th? Sorry? Ease of doing business, 29th, right? Yeah, 29th. So that's second in Africa. Mauritius is its own special financial center case. 29th. So that is better than Germany, better than France. And I was giving a talk to the Dutch. I love that the Canadians loved it. We're very close, the Canadians and Dutch. And they said it's better than the Holland. So you think of these major economies that have hundreds of years of sort of private sector, public sector cooperation, rule of law, et cetera. Rwanda, in terms of ease of doing business, is better. So the thing I like about this slide is it gives hope to the other countries around Africa, that they can achieve the same thing. And I have no doubt that Nigeria can achieve these similar sorts of inclusive economic growth if it does a few things right. Okay, so the other thing I wanted to talk about, so I said what's dragging growth down is the giants of Africa. But the other thing I wanted to talk about a little bit is the informal sector. So as I said, I didn't come to be an economist. I just came to serve my clients. I had a happy little life in Lagos, and I said I love Lagos. Most of my clients are banks or financial sector, the stock exchange, investment banks. So I live in central Lagos, VI, for those who are Nigerian. My clients are in VI. I play tennis in VI. I box in VI. My office is in VI. It looks over the Atlantic Ocean. Those who follow me on Twitter know if there's a storm coming in, I'll tweet it. And most importantly, my bars are in VI. So I'm a very happy life in Nigeria. And then I got pushed to be an economist because I have the training for it. And one of the things that you find as an economist is these numbers keep getting repeated, right? So the IMF says this number, the World Bank says this number, and then you put it in a slide, and then they're like kind of internet memes, okay? I think one of the things that I've come to realize over time is that most of these numbers are wrong, right? They don't reflect the real economy. So I have my dear friend, Razia Khan, who's very famous, and I love her, but she sits in London for Standard Chartered doing the economic numbers. She gets the IMF number, puts out a paper, flies to Lagos for one day, gives us a little talk about all of this. And these numbers are inaccurate. They do not reflect the real economic activity that's going on in Africa for a number of reasons. But one reason is because this contribution of the informal sector on this. Now, we are saying, so when I first started to understand this, I didn't really know what to make of it now. But what PwC says now is, look, this is a major part of the economy. People choose to be either in the informal sector or the informal sector, formal or informal. The reason that so many people choose to be in the informal sector is because the formal sector is too hard, too expensive, too complex. If you want to bring people into the formal sector, which means you can tax them, you can't force them into the formal sector. You need to encourage them in that. And you might have heard the ambassador say, and because I tweeted it too, $60 to $90 billion of intra-Africa trade is actually informal. So as much as the formal sector. So if you don't understand the informal trade, you don't understand the economy at all. And that's one of the messages we're putting out in Nigeria is, okay, if we want to bring 65% of the economy to the informal sector, so first off, what do our GDP numbers mean? Because we don't know how much of that's captured. Secondly, if you want to bring the informal sector, you cannot coerce people. They have a way of doing things. For myself personally, when I have to, basically, I have a very simple economic life. I earn money and I send it to my ex-wife. I earn money and send it to my ex-wife. And the way I send it is with the Aboki system, right? And I don't know what the equivalent is for, what's the word you use in Eritrea? No, it's not a black market. It's an informal market. Don't say black market, can I? Parallel market, okay. So Okay, so if you don't understand this, but this also is encouraging because presumably with the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, we can get more formal structure. People want to be more in the informal economy, right? So we'll bring them in, tax revenue, they'll get benefits. So that's got to be part of the plan. I know that Exim Bank thinks a lot. They were really the first ones to start thinking about this, right? The informal trade, and it's very much on your agenda. So then the other thing I wanted to talk about, because I've only got a few minutes. Sorry, this graph, if you take the graphs, does show this movement between now and 2100 in working age population. So China declines over 40% in a century, whereas Congo goes up by 400%. Even India declines on that. So it's an extraordinary shift in where people are in this world. Okay, so I just want to talk about this because, as I said, it took me a long time to figure out that the way that we think about the economy is not accurate. So in Nigeria, we keep repeating, or people did at least till recently, till we said something, this economic meme that said, we're an oil nation, we're an oil nation, we're an oil nation. 90% of our export, of our dollar, like our FX comes from oil. And we looked at this and said, well, this is actually completely inaccurate. So in 2018, the NNPC in Nigeria transferred $10 billion into the Federation account. In the same year, the diaspora sent in official channels $25 billion. The only thing holding up the Nigerian economy are the diaspora remittances. And of course, this is just the official remittances. There's a lot of unofficial. AFDB says at least it's 50% of official. So that would mean in Nigeria, more than $40 billion, almost $40 billion is coming in this way. Our official imports are $40 billion. So if you didn't have this $25 billion, the economy would essentially collapse. But that's true around all of Africa, right? So here we've got Ghana, it's a much smaller economy, 1/7, but it still has 1/7 of remittances, 3.8. Kenya, 2.7 billion. Again, all just the official numbers. You cannot understand the structure of African economies without understanding the diaspora. And that's also, Toya, one reason why I think this sort of forum is so fantastic is one of the things we're starting to talk about with the governments, also at the state level, is how do you organize the diaspora more effectively to be part of it? Because obviously the diaspora, they're supporting people in their daily consumption, tuition fees, medical care. They also want to invest. And the governments have not created, not the governments, God forbid, the private sector has not yet created the channels, despite all this incredible goodwill, despite the incredible wealth of the diaspora, we still have not created the right channels for it to have optimum impact in Africa. The other thing to put this in perspective, some people, Westerners, I guess, have the impression that the West gives aid to Africa. So the official aid statistics, if I remember right, in Nigeria, are about $2.7 billion. Now, I love my friends at DFID, but when DFID gives money, I don't think more than 30 or 40% of it actually comes in the country, right? Because the DFID officials are British, and they buy a Land Rover, and it shows up to drive them around, and so out of the 2.7 billion, at most half is entering the country. So the official aid entering is a little over 1 billion. Africans abroad are contributing 25 billion. So no one should be saying that Africans are being supported by, and of course, we all know illegal financial flows, the scale of that. Money's being taken out of Africa. So there's no question the people supporting Africa are Africans. But I think both of these factors, the diaspora and the informal economy, are things that we need to take account of as we develop Africa. And of course, the reason that AFCFTA, no one underestimates the scale of the challenge. We all know living in Africa, the non-tariff barriers, the border cross posting issues, rules of origin. But Africa has no choice except to do this. And I'll end on just explaining why. So if you go back to the demographics, So let's say in 2040, roughly, there's almost 2 billion people in Africa, 1.6 billion in India, still 1.3 billion in China. If we only sell raw materials, okay, the value is only 5 to 8% of the finished goods value. Now, if you only have a few people, that could be fine. So you could be like Norway, right? You sell, I think, 5 million barrels of oil a day, but you've only got 5 million people. You're going to be a wealthy country. If you are the demographic weight of the world, it's mathematically impossible to be wealthy selling raw materials, right? Just because you've got so many people. Nigeria is a good example of that. We sell 2 million barrels of oil a day, but we've got 200 million people. So if we don't produce higher value-added goods, then we're destined to be poor. We can't be prosperous in Africa, okay? Now, if we're going to produce value-added goods, who are we going to sell them to? Well, the population in Europe is shrinking. Population in China is shrinking. Population in India is stable or shrinking. It's not very easy to sell higher value-added goods to markets where the market's shrinking because you've got to displace someone else, right? So what's the only growing market in the world? It's Africa. So Africans can only be prosperous selling to Africans, which means that despite how challenging it is, if we at least with the AFCFTA, we have a non-zero probability of being prosperous. Without the AFCFTA, we have a 0 probability. And I'd rather take the bet on the non-zero probability. So let me stop there. God bless Nigeria. God bless Africa. So.